everyone. Thank you for coming, showing up to our panel today. I am joined by Janos and James. You can see here. I'm going to introduce them to you all a little bit. But first of all, we wanted to find out who we've got in the audience today. So I wonder if I can have a show of hands for who is a founder. Got any founders? Few. Awesome. Startup employees amongst the team? Yeah. Any others? There are a few hands that we haven't seen.
If you're an investor, you can raise your wallet instead of your hand directly.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that, guys.
No investors here then.
So firstly, I'm joined by Janos on my right. He's the founder of Founders Taboo. And on my left, I'm joined with James, who is the host of Vulnerable Podcast, which is the Founders Taboo podcast. It's the UK's #1 founder mental health podcast, which you can get on Spotify and all of your streaming services.
It's also the UK's only founder mental health podcast.
That's a point we will get onto shortly. So to get us started then, Janos, I'll start with you. If you could tell the audience a little bit about how you've ended up on the Infobip stage talking about founder mental health. What's your story?
So my name is Janos Barberis. I'm the founder of Founders Taboo, but I started maybe being on stage here about 7 years ago. There were one person who is in the room. There is Rebecca over here. There's also Nick, which I don't think he's showing up. So Rebecca, if you want to text Nick to say that he needs to show up in the next 28 minutes. But the point is, I was building the largest fintech accelerator back in Hong Kong. We got about 4 unicorns coming out of us, and I was 26 when I started. 26, bootstrapped the company into the largest ecosystem at an incredible value for fintech startups globally, but at an incredible price for me personally. The short version is I went to the hospital and I recovered only 5 years later to then rebuild a new company, which is Supercharger 2.0. But doing that, I made a decision to actively not only take care of my founders' mental health, but also the founders' mental health of a portfolio, because I believe that healthier founder generates healthier return. And so there's an entire education to be done. And that's the reason why we're on stage here, is to start opening the discussion on outcome-based well-being for founders. It's not just a cost for you as a founder to take care of yourself. It should be a validated expense supported by your board, by your investor, because there's 2 outcomes. Either you're going to be very successful or you're going to be burning out. And the VCs need to clear out the burnout risk in order to be allowing founders to flourish. So that's the mission of Founders Taboo. That's the reason why I'm here. And hopefully, if we can have one founder that takes something useful from this, it would be amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And James, how have you ended up here talking about founder mental health?
I started building companies when I was 22, 23 actually. And I don't know, I just felt very different when I was building them. I was very different to my peer group and trying to understand what this whole founder life was about. But having built 2 companies, I now realized that I built both companies in a high, and then I had to either leave or exit one in a low. And now, in March, I was diagnosed with type 2 bipolar affective disorder, which actually is incredibly common amongst startup founders, amongst the ecosystem as a whole. Why am I here? Well, I started Vulnerable because I wanted to give a voice to founders to express their mental health. The battles we go through, the battles the startup ecosystem goes through, I wanted to give them a platform to explore that. And the reaction was pretty crazy. We started getting more and more founders, but also investors coming on the podcast and exploring their mental health, which I never really thought about. And that is why I'm on stage here, is to talk about Vulnerable Podcast, but also talk about bipolar when it comes to being a founder and being in the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. To kick us off then, Janos, why do you think it's difficult for founders and also startup employees to slow down? Where does that come from?
So, I mean, founders are pretty forward-looking, right? So we had a panel before about storytelling and being an operator. Founders look for tomorrow because this is where the value is, whether you raise money or whether you sell to a client, but they need to have a level of foresight. If you don't have foresight, there's no money to be made because everyone is doing it. Now, taking care of yourself means looking back or slowing down. which is a very challenging thing to accept for you as a company. Then you have a second element, which is how do you justify taking care of yourself? There's certain companies here that are bootstrapped. Any founders which are bootstrapped here? Okay, one. Any founders that raise money, friends, families, investors, fools, so works. On the second element is if you were to spend money for yourself as opposed to your company, it is also challenging because you go, but I can hire an intern, I can hire a CTO, I can hire an ad, I can spend it on it, as opposed to why should I take care for me for a therapist? I will fix myself at one point once I hit that milestone. And I think that challenge and that tension prevents founders therefore from taking care of themselves. So what do you need? You need someone above to either override because you don't have the self-awareness. That can be your board, your investors, but it can also be the ecosystem, the community saying stop down, it's fine. Or you as a founder, if you have the right level of self-awareness, you are then able to say, no, I need to do this because down the line, whatever we say, if a founder leaves a company, the company stops. And that's something that you also need to realize. And if I'm not here to steer the ship sinks. So I think it's you have that, and that's the reason why founders have that difficulty is allowing themselves to take a break because their brains are not wired to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. James, I wonder what's your take on that? Why is it difficult for founders, startup employees to slow down?
I think historically we've been geared in building startups to just push, 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 and push. And you don't want to slow down because you've got targets, you've got investors on your back, you've got your own personal drives that you want to build $1 billion company, you want to build a $100 million company, but it's really difficult to then stop and go, I don't feel good today. I haven't felt good for the last month. And I really should stop because you've got employees to look after, you've got yourself to look after. And I think we have a choice now, which we're trying to show people that they have a choice, which is not to get off the rat race or shift away from it entirely, but it's to think differently about how we run and build companies. And I think the choice from a founder, and most importantly, we believe, investors, is to really shine a light on founder mental health so that actually we can build better companies.
Definitely. I think it's a trend we're seeing more commonly now in startups is to start thinking about sustainability for the planet, but what about sustainability for yourself to be able to build right through to the very end?
I mean, look, the number is simple. It's, do you know how many startups, so there's public numbers, right? What is the percentage of startups failing because running out of cash? Anyone? So 40, 50, 60%. What's the startup failure rate for burnout? So burnout is the primary reason for founder failure. It's 7%. So more or less 1 in 10 founder will close their company because of this as an issue.
Followed then by co-founder relationship breaking up, which also is interlinked, which is about 65%.
So we live in a time where, whether it's from climate change, whether it's in fintech, whether it's thing where we need people to solve some of the biggest problems that we have ahead of us. We're in a world of crisis, migration, a world of crisis when it comes to the economy, a world of crisis when it comes to war, a world of crisis when it comes to the environment. We need founders to solve those topics. But the more founders we will have, the more statistically we're going to have people burning out. And so if we need founders to create a better world, to the point about sustainability, we need to create now an ecosystem layer of caring for them whilst they will be caring for the biggest issue at stake for us. So that's, I think, how it links back to sustainability.
Yeah, definitely. And on the back of that, what do you think needs to change in the startup ecosystem for us to start adding that layer?
So raise your hand again if you're a founder. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we have 10 founders and just like, so, okay, so we have 5. So 70% of founders at any given time have a mental health issue. So I'm not gonna, so we have 5 founders here. There is 3 of the 5 that have something, and I don't think that you would be yet willing to come on stage and say, yes, I have something. So I think we first need to start talking, saying, no, I have something, it's fine, I need to talk about my well-being. Once we get this, then we can start acting on it. But I think step 1 is awareness building. Step 2 is action, and we'll be doing a workshop tomorrow on this. And then step 3 is you don't need to even ask for it. It should be taken for granted that this is a right for you as a founder to take care of yourself. But yeah, those are the statistics. 70% have, at any given time, a condition.
I mean, just to add to that, I think you can have all the conversations you want in this industry. I can record as many podcasts as I can for the next 30 years, which if I did one a week, wouldn't even touch the size, to be honest with you, on the problem. But we also have to have a acceptance from founders that there is a potential problem. And that also requires responsibility from founders themselves to look at this problem and take action and take note. For example, with bipolar, obviously Dr. Michael Freeman will be releasing his research, but startup founders are actually, well, entrepreneurs are 11 times more likely to be on the bipolar spectrum than the rest of society. Which, if you think about that, is extraordinary. We go through the highs and we go through the lows, and then there's a large proportion of us who get either stuck in the highs or get stuck in the lows. So talk about it, but then take action. I was forced to take action in March because I had my last episode in last November, which led me to exit the company. I then had a psychotic episode in December because I couldn't get out of this low. I'm an entrepreneur, so I was like, well, what am I doing? Which company I'm building next? But I was in this hole. And then I was forced to take action because I had to take responsibility for that and go, wow, okay, where's my life gone? I don't recognize it now. So I just think that we have to also promote founders taking responsibility for this, as well as the other action that we're taking in the ecosystem to promote, for venture and investors to also accept and promote, and for founders to take responsibility as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's an important point to remember that mental health, well-being care doesn't always need to be prescriptive. So it doesn't need to be that something has happened, you've hit a burnout, and then that's when you start to take care of yourself. It should be more of a preventative approach. So it should be something that all of you tonight, no matter whether you're a founder, startup employee, or wherever you're coming from, that you start to implement it as part of your routine. The same way that you eat breakfast every morning, the same way that you brush your teeth, you should be brushing your brain, however that works for you, because it's something that will impact you in the long term if you don't take action from the start. Janos, what's your thoughts?
So I think it's part of the education is also, but why should I do it, right? So what? Why does it matter? And when you run a startup, and when, by the way, you're in a startup team, and whether you're a senior manager, et cetera, you are taking decision in uncertainty the entire time. That's the whole point of being a startup, right? It's, again, information value, and you are taking decision on things you do not know will happen. You cannot take decision in uncertainty when you don't have a clear mind to focus on what's going ahead. If I give you an example, for example, we've been, again, talking about the unicorn element. Think about WeWork and Adam Newman. Now, personality aside, on the traits that he has a company that was about to IPO for 40 billion. He's on a downhill race. They're now fire selling the company at 8 billion, and he still has the capacity to focus to take home $1 billion home. Thinking clearly on the way up is incredibly difficult because you have even more uncertainty building up because you don't know where you're going to go next. Thinking clearly on the way down, when you're firefighting, you have that quote, which is everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. This is something that you can prevent and you can start working on as a founder by doing those level of self-care on a regular basis. But the thing is, it doesn't happen instantly. So if I take my personal example, we're running another company where we're raising on Series A. I decided 2 years ago when we started Founders Taboo with Annabelle, Dani, James, and Eleni. We started 2 years ago taking care of my well-being to do a $100 million Series A in a year from now. Because I don't think I would be able to cope with a $100 million company if I didn't take care of my well-being. So it's something that you plan because you know it will happen to you, because statistically, you will be likely hit by a very challenging element in your personal life that therefore will affect your mental fitness.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that as well. I'd like to steer the conversation now to James. So Vulnerable, the UK's #1 founder mental health podcast, the UK's only founder mental health podcast, has been really well received. Why do you think this is? Because we've been talking about founder mental health and saying that it is a huge taboo in society, and yet everybody is listening to the episodes and everybody's tuning in. What's that about?
Well, I think plain and simple, nobody's ever given founders and investors a platform to talk openly about what they've been going through. And there's other podcasts, of course, that touch on the issue, but there is no dedicated place and platform to do it. And I think that is all we created. That's all I created, was a place for founders at any stage in their journey, because we've had bootstrap founders up to founders who have just exited for $500 million come on and talk. We've had investors, angel and venture, come on and talk. And it is purely a platform where people feel safe to be vulnerable in this space, this ecosystem, which historically has never really been vulnerable before because of the power dynamics at play. And that I just think it is, apart from me being an amazing host.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think it's a piece of, it's not being discussed, but it's being felt. So they see a kind of reflection in the pond in the form of the podcast, because stories are finally being spoken, which have been felt by so many founders, for sure.
Sorry, just to I mean, look, the relatability of podcasting is interesting as a kind of network effect across content, but we tell stories that are personalized to founders, because obviously they're telling their own stories, but actually each story has quite a large element of relatability to it, which is amazing. And so we've now got founders and investors listening to podcast episodes, watching podcast episodes, and being able to relate to what's being said, who then actually want to come on to the podcast. So I just think relatability when we're founders and we're trying to build businesses and we're all going through our own personalized routes, but being able to relate to somebody else on their journey is massive.
Definitely. I think what I'm hearing under the surface there really is the power of community, the power of social support. Janos, I wonder what you think. Within Founders Taboo, community has been such an important piece for us. Why do you think that's so useful in terms of supporting entrepreneurs along that startup roller coaster?
So I think it's you. Actually, I wanted to go back on relatability. Just going back on the investor side, which is an important element. So on the investor side, if you look at VC ecosystems, mainly in Europe, VC ecosystems are typically finance people that have been working in public market, right? So public market like stocks, public stocks, etc., etc. And when you are built to trade, well, first of all, you don't trade relationships. Like founders is private market. It's empathy, it's connection, it's people, it's relationship. You do not deal with a founder's stock in the same way that you deal with Tesla. And when you have been a banker and been trained on the way up, you are being trained that selling Tesla will not know about it. So don't be emotional. And I think that the reason why it's important is because founders are all in their lives to work into a company. If you're an investor, it's one of your portfolio. So already here you start to have a disconnect between someone who has 100% risk exposure on a topic and someone that has 1/10, 1/20, 100 into it. Even more knowing the fact that only 1 out of 10 will then generate a return for you, so therefore you write out the other 9 out of 10. So I think that you had kind of an abusive relationship going on, with founders courting investors for money, but investors then not being able to court back what the founders want. And now I think that discussion is changing. Why? Because founders are getting better, ecosystems are getting more mature, and a bit like in a relationship, when you start understanding what you want with a partner, you start to understand what you want from an investor. Is yes, I want your money, but I want. It's not necessarily your smart money, right? Because investors invest other people's money in other people's idea, but maybe a sense of, I can ask you something when I really need to. And it takes a first time to not have someone in front of you, so that the second time when you go to that investor, you'll have it. And I think that's the reason why the community works, is we are speaking a language that founders understand, and for the first time it's properly being spoken out on stage or on the media, and therefore it hits home straight away.
Just before this, I was on a call with a VC, just a friend, and I was talking to him about founder mental health and well-being and just catching up. He's been at Index Ventures for a few years. And he was talking about how he thinks there's a shift in venture, seeing this marketplace in the middle, this marketplace effect where, of course, VCs are run almost exclusively to return money back to their LPs, and founders and their companies are the product which they need to grow and expand and make look beautiful. And he was saying, well, actually, how do we make the product of being a founder better? How can we build better products in venture so that it returns more money to LPs? And of course, if they return more money to LPs, they raise another fund, right? So if we can look at founders and their companies, historically, VC has looked at, I think, founders, well, they looked at the company as the product. We now need to look at the founders as the product who are building a great company, because actually it's the founders who drive company growth. And if we can build up better products in founders, then we can drive up better companies, and we spiral and we keep going. So yeah, it was just interesting that there's a little bit of seed now in interest in top funds.
But then in that case, the way of doing it, and actually a lot of founders, and I think whether you're a founder, whether you've seen startup pitch decks, you tend to see this. We tend to say founders are the reason why you invest in, right? You are the person. On average, your team slide is team 6 or team slide 7. Look, let's cut the bullshit. Like, if you are the product that people is investing in, you put your face on the fucking first slide of the deck and you go, I'm going to be rising this company. I'm going to be driving it. You need to support me. The rest, leave it to me. But founders talking about founders not putting themselves first, you have it on those pitch decks, especially pre-seed, seed. After, once you start having metrics, starts to be a different game. But let's call therefore a cat a cat. If we need to care for an asset, and that asset is that founder, put this on the very first slide. And founders don't do this because it's self-imposed, by the way. It's not that VCs are bad necessarily. I think it's we have not allowed the discussion to saying, I would like to be taken care of. And that starts with putting yourself on the very first slide of that deck. It sounds a little bit narcissistic, but to your point, which is if this is what we need, well, therefore let's do it on the very first slide, not on slide 7.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think that's a very clear-cut representation of what's happening with founders not putting themselves first. I want the audience to leave with some kind of idea of what's next, and also how they can themselves start to slow down to speed up. So I wonder if both of you could provide an example of what you have found useful in your journey that allows you to take care of yourself, putting yourself first. What do you engage in that you could recommend others try and test for themselves?
Janos can go first.
So me is very practical. And by the way, someone else has questions. We have 5 minutes, we'll have time, but if some of you have questions, please ask. So what I've done is, well, I have 2 great friends here, Nick and Rebecca. The other thing is, you can see there's a dog on that picture, which slightly got cropped out.
Just about.
So Nick, it's a shame that Freud is cropped out. I'll tell Freudy. So what I've done is, I moved back to Austria. I got a dog that allowed me to take care of myself, so literally an emotional support animal. This friendship, which are not necessarily in the startup community, is incredibly useful. Short term. Long term, it's investing in yourself. We're running retreats on a regular basis. It's been 2 years I've been doing it. I'm getting better. We're doing a workshop a little bit later. But I think practically you need emotion. Long term, you need rational things. Rational workshop, retreats, self-care. Short term, friends which are not in the startup community and they really don't care how much you raise, but they care about grabbing a beer in Tokyo or going on a hike with a dog. Sounds practical, but that's what I've seen work the best, for example, for me. And then a supportive team. We talk about the founder and the team. Having a team that is allowed to work around the fact that you're ever so slightly different because of your pains and because of your life stories. And often founders are misfit, and they will create a team that shapes around that misfitness in order for them to be able to move forward. Richard Branson has ADHD. He doesn't fit on his typical corporate environment. He therefore built a company in order for people to not see him in a crutch, but see him in a flourishing state. So team is also a very important element.
What do I do? Well, first and foremost, it's recognizing that you might need to slow down. I mean, that's literally what I had to do. I was in this cycle for 6 years, 6.5 years of boom and bust, and I couldn't go on I couldn't live my life like that. So recognizing that there was something not quite right and going to get help. We can put in the well-being pillars, we can meditate, we can do all the great things, ice bath that I do. If you'll see me on LinkedIn soon, I sit in an ice bath every morning. Can't hear, sad, shame. But it's really just going to get help at the right moments. And I can't stress this enough. When I speak to founders in my community who are like, well, I've never been to a therapist before, or I've never seen a psychologist, or I've never done anything about it, I've just continued to go on. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Go and get some help. It's okay to go and get help. It's okay as a founder to take a step back. Tell your team I'm going to get help, because actually it empowers your team to be great people too. So, yeah, if you want to have a chat about bipolar or what even that means, and I'll be at the end over there, and you can come and have a chat. And I'd love to meet anybody who might suffer in this room. And also, we are recording the podcast here. If there are any founders who want to come and find me at the end of this, and we can schedule some time for tomorrow and have a sit down and have a natter and create some content.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, and as we're kind of coming to a close, wrapping up, I think it's important for everybody to be able to leave with that final point. So I wonder if each of you could share one sentence, a one-liner, a simple statement that you think should stick in everybody's minds as they leave today.
What was the sentence you said at the beginning? Take a break or don't wreck yourself?
Check yourself and not wreck yourself.
There you go. So that's exactly what I'm saying, because literally it was an amazing sentence. So all credit to her, so check yourself so you don't wreck yourself. Yeah, so there you go. That would be mine.
Mine is...
Yours, actually, so...
Yeah, it's not yours. You've ripped it off. Mine is, being a founder is hard, so don't make it harder.
Great. Short and sweet. Wonderful. Thank you so much for everybody coming, listening to our panel today. We will linger around, so if you want to come and have a chat, please do. Come and have a chat with James for the podcast. We are recording whilst we're here today and tomorrow, so come find us. And also tomorrow we do have a workshop. It is on at 12:15. I can't remember if it's workshop 1 or 2, but find on your agenda. So you can find 1. Fabulous. Workshop 1, 12:15 tomorrow. You can hear some more actionable take-home tips in what we suggest for founders, startup employees to action on and start taking care of themselves.
Just before we finish, can I get a selfie with everyone, please? I know this is really, really, really cheesy, but it's going to go on my social media, and I would love you all forever. So if we can put our hands up or be enthusiastic about founder mental health and founder well-being, that'd be amazing. There we go.